was isolation and rival. He was doing his, what's the second residency, whatever it is.
So now we have a page.
So what's it's another, the round building downtown.
Yes.
And then we page young Dr. Hamlin and
She watches
old Dr. Hamlin.
I don't come think of my God.
Mr. Donnie, when they installed the.
All right, we get started? 7:15, so welcome to the July 2024 meeting of the Mid-Atlantic Amateur Radio Club. So I'm Jeremy, N2 ZLQ Club President.
For like, or even longer.
For life, all right. So as normal, we'll go around with the round of intros.
Ned, WQ3Z, am I making the machine? Actually, when I'm in Newtown Square, I know I'm making the machine. Thank you, Dennis.
Bob and 3J.
Jim, W3JNF.
Lou, WX3I.
Jeff, WA3RIZ. Dennis, K3BS.
Webmaster.
Michael and 30MR. Dan, KC3YPK. Bob, W3ZQN.
Battery 2 in Chester County, since there are 5 batteries in Chester. K3EU.
All right, welcome everyone. So I'll see, we'll quickly go through some of the upcoming club events. So let's see, let's go through it. Dennis,
Handfest?
what do you want to do? Hamfest first?
You pointed to me, so I don't know.
All right,
You're up.
I'll do repeaters, we'll give you Hamfest.
Okay. Unfortunately, didn't really make any notes. We kind of had a lot of things happen since the last meeting. So I can remember them all. Well, we've been to.
If you go back here, you'll be on the internet. Or stay off the grid.
So anyway, yeah, we've have now distributed 3,000 Hamfest flyers to, let's see, I guess we went to Warminster Hamfest back in May. I think I'm missing one here, but Harrisburg Hamfest, MARC KBU took the stack to Mergas, the Mergas Hamfest. I'm sure I'm missing a Hamfest in between those two or three. Then we went to Sussex. We distributed over 400 Hamfest flyers at Sussex in Augusta, New Jersey. We've had Ralph Hess, who's the owner of the New Holland Radio Shack, take a stack of Hamfest flyers to a Hamfest in Virginia, which I can't remember the name of. And he also has put them in his store and taken them to the Red Rose repeater groups, club meetings. And the next Hamfest we have that's coming up is Saturday, July 27th. I think that's this Saturday. That's in the New Jersey Antique Radio Club's summer tailgate swap meet and Hamfest, and that's in Wall, New Jersey. It's probably about maybe an hour away. Unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to make this one, so if anybody wants to take Hamfest flyers to it, here's the flyer for it, and I can get you a stack of Hamfest flyers. And let's see what else. We have another stack of Hamfest flyers that are actually a pad of Hamfest flyers that are ready to go to the Reading Radio Club's Hamfest, which is the week before our Hamfest. So that's kind of what we've been doing for advertising the Hamfest. We've now spoken with Nick from the Suburban Food Service. He's going to provide a food truck for us, so that's all nailed down. And let's see. Unfortunately, we've not because I've been busy with stuff at home and with the Hamfests and stuff. I've not been able to get together a work party to repair the outside speakers on the A building at the Cambridge Fire Company. So unfortunately, we're gonna do have to do a B version of this, of the Hamfest, of the speakers for the outside of the building. This year, I'm gonna try to make some improvements between now and then, try to get them up in the air a little better. But unfortunately, that didn't pan out for the Hamfest. We have to, we are under obligation to make those repairs from last year, so we will get those done hopefully after the Hamfest at some point. And so it'll be ready for next year. So that's the sound system speakers.
Maybe we can do it in the fall when it's not 1,000 degrees out.
Get used to 1,000 degrees.
Bob, do we have tickets to our entry and game prizes?
Yeah, we got some new admission tickets printed up, and I think we're gonna try to squeak by with the rest of the tickets that we have, and then by the next year we'll have to do the tickets, totally new all over again instead of just the admission tickets. So, but we'll use all of them up and so. So that's that. What else? We've been getting some people, requesting tables already. Ralph Hess from New Holland Radio Shack wants 6 tables. Charles Haller, I think is it, I forget what his call is, but he's been to our Hamfest many times, at least 3 or 4 anyway, recently. He gets those 6 tables along the wall where we used to have our club table. So I talked to him at Harrisburg, and he's coming, he says. And we've gotten other emails from different individuals and about getting tables, so.
What did you decide to do, Jimmy? You saw.
Yeah, Jim and I went over to her house a couple weeks ago, and we made an inventory, and I'm gonna try to come up with some price ranges for stuff. And apparently Steve, I have to get with Steve, SLT, and he's going to transport all the stuff to the Hamfest, and I assume whatever doesn't sell, he'll transport it back. But
Does she need a separate table?
I'm hoping that we can have a similar setup like we had last year, where we actually had extra space left over. We had like a table or 2 that went unused because we kind of stretched everything out, and because Steve said, was telling me that he needed like a lot of space for his stuff, so I kind of reconfigured things, and we had like a lot of space. And I know Dieter has an estate to bring to the Hamfest as well, so there'll be a lot of stuff, but I think seems to me we had like at least 6 tables, I think, 5 tables anyway, maybe 5 or 6 tables available for club member use, estate use and stuff, so I think that's a pretty good club table. And what else?
We're gonna have the planning meeting on
Yeah.
August 6th.
August 6th, Tuesday, it's a Tuesday, right?
Yeah, the Tuesday
Tuesday,
before, so
yeah.
we'll just do that on Zoom.
Yeah, we'll have a Zoom meeting before the Hamfest for any last minute details. And as far as
That's on the calendar.
No, it
yeah.
isn't.
Email
Email or are you notified?
Just email me.
All right.
I didn't get an email, yeah.
No.
And as far as the Hamfest itself, there's of course the setup day. We need lots and lots of help on the setup day to set tables up and signs and the sound system and talking radio antenna.
Mark, we're kicking off. So
What's that?
What time are we kicking off?
12 noon on Saturday. 12 noon, and Mark WA3QVU is going to bring his speakers again, put up by the pole, the telephone pole by the entrance. And so hopefully we can get that together. I did not, was not able to come up with an RF link for that, so we're gonna have to be using the wire again. But I've seen it work okay last year. And I tried to get the these things that would help us make an RF link on was it 2.4 gigahertz or something. It's something that's commonly used in the music industry, but unfortunately, where I was going to buy it from had the receivers back ordered until after August, so I kind of shot that down until next year. So maybe next year we'll have nice sound system and on the speakers on the outside and an RF link to save us a lot of work setting up the far speakers. So, and what else? Yeah, just a lot of setup, required on setup day, and we also want to try to do a better job with the parking tailgaters. I think last year they actually parked pretty good. I think one year it was the year before that, it was an absolute zoo. It's a terrible mess because we didn't have enough people to get the rows started and stuff early enough, and so we need to definitely fix that. And of course, we need people for collecting, selling admission tickets and tailgate tickets and so forth.
If this is a stupid idea, shoot me down.
Okay.
How about when we get there in the morning? We have the first people who get there, place the cars where we want the tailgaters to start. So you've got a start, and you just say, park next to that car.
Good idea.
You park personal vehicles like.
Yeah.
Just like for instance, if you get there first, you say, put your car at the end of this row for the tailgating, and that way they can just, the next tailgater says park next to the Ford Fusion, park next to such and such.
Yeah, that's an idea.
They're coming in such a row that by the time they get there's gonna be 5 more cars parked in that row.
Right.
But, and the other thing too is a lot of people like the end spot, the end spot is a coveted.
And you know what, if they wanna pay extra, I'll come over and move my car. I'm serious. Or frankly,
Or your son's.
or yeah.
Sounds like you work for the
Or
airports.
alternatively, if it's like a friend of Mark that we would like to give it to the end spot, again, I'll move it.
We should need to do
No,
that,
it's something to think
let them put their car on the end,
Or
instead of taking it across.
The other side of it, yeah.
So, well, we'll think about it.
Also, can I get a dozen Hamfest flyers tonight?
Don't have them with me tonight, but I can get them to you if you want,
No, RF Hill is Thursday.
Thursday.
Can I get
Okay.
one?
On the website,
Let
you have
me
a printer.
Well, probably don't want to stop at Staples on the way home because.
let me talk to Mark WA3QBU. He may have already taken them to RFL.
No, the club meeting is Thursday,
Okay.
not, their Hamfest is. September, October, something.
And they were very good shape for door prizes. I'm trying to tell them.
Thank you.
We're still waiting for the ARL one because they're coming to you. They want to be. But we've got like 12 other manufacturers, Tile, Icon, RT Systems, that's the programming software business. We got all kinds of hand threads. We got some really good door prizes. The ICOP sent us 18 bags, and I've been filling them with all the giveaways, like pens and pads and all that stuff, like 18 bags to give away. That'd be nice.
That's
And
great.
if anybody needs any 811As, for the Pental Labs, they sent me 2 of their brand new 811As. That's a nice bird prize. That's like $300.
Wow.
So whoever did a stack, I put them on eBay. Get 20. That's fine.
So, and let's see what else. I guess that's about it. I guess.
Yeah.
I have a question, what's the average attendance?
I think our total attendance is in the ballpark of 300 between tailgaters, inside vendors, and attendants, I think. Which I'd like to, at some point, maybe we could you know, get that number to go up a little bit, maybe if we keep our advertising. But that's just kind of the ballpark where we're at the moment. Someday maybe we'll get seat tickets or something, we'll figure out, you know, how to count stuff up better.
Well, we know we still have the receipts, right? Have receipts been going down year by year or?
Well, the receipts have been pretty flat. We did a little bit better last year, we also raised our price this year. Right. Alright. And this year we raised the price again.
Alright,
So what is the pricing?
so we have 10 and 10,
10 and 10.
so 10 across the board.
The math is easy, makes it easier.
10, yeah, the only discount is like multiple tables, I think goes down to 8.
Right.
That would be Bob's problem. Alright, let's see. Actually, we have 2 new folks who've joined us, you guys wanna introduce yourselves?
This is another new one.
So all the new folks. What's your name, your call sign?
So for me,
Yeah.
I'm Jesse, KC3YBW. I've been to a couple meetings before, but this is my third. I got licensed in end of March of this year.
Hi, I'm Chris, KF4ZOH. I got my license about 26 years ago down in Georgia. And got busy with doing the whole parenting thing.
Yeah.
And now I'm sending my middle one off to college in northern Maine. And when we went up, there was a heck of a lot of dead spots, so I said to my husband, I think it's time. I think it's time for me to get back into ham radio. And look into getting my next license class.
Alright,
Testing session at the VE Sandfest.
yeah, Chris has already emailed me about doing the general. Alright,
Oh, you might want to point out, March members, we waive the fee, we still do that. We still, so that's one, you take one exam a year, right, waive the fee. Pretty good deal. And if you go to the holiday party, we charge $10 for a $20 meal. So you basically get all your membership.
Yeah, I'm the Dan, AC3 YPK, I got my license in March as well. And I've always wanted to do this, have planning for retirement coming up. So really looking forward to doing it.
Very cool.
Well, thanks.
alright, so let's work our way down the line. How about Jim? Public service, field day, anything else that you're responsible for?
That's it for now. First of all, we had a nice field day. I think we had a good field day. We could have had some more attendees, but I think everybody that was there had a good time. Lots of food. I was just talking a little about the expenses, but and Dennis, I want to thank Dennis for putting all that together and submitting it. So that's all been done. Does anybody have any things that they think we should change or add next year?
Yeah, not being 99 degrees.
Yeah, well, that's.
I mentioned this to Jeremy, I think a human interest story for QST on the radio merit badge would really put mark on that.
Oh, yeah, that's a great idea. That's a
I
wonderful.
think you should really, you hopefully got some pictures, I hope. If you know, get to do it.
We'll definitely have to get some more pictures, and do that. That's a great idea, Dennis. Because we're one of the few clubs that actually do that. Yeah, so it's good. And we have 5 merit badge counselors in the club. Yes,
We're gonna talk about this fact that we actually used the drone to.
yes,
String the antenna.
yes. And it actually worked the first time.
Did you get any pictures of that for QST?
We got some.
Yeah, we got some pictures.
Let's send it in.
Yeah, so that worked out well. But thank everybody. I mean, and next year, we want to try to beef it up because it's always a good time. I think the heat had a lot to do with certain people not coming, so it was brutally hot, brutally hot. I was
I
a
think it
little,
impacted our score a little bit too, so by the time we were done with the scouts, we were all,
I know, yeah.
nobody wanted to go here.
Well, me, by 9:30 in the morning, you said, come and take this stuff away, we're backing out.
Yeah, the suns are,
Yeah.
out of here.
It was early pack out, but yeah, thank you everybody for that. Public service, the next public service event is the Charles Bender Memorial Swim. And that's on August 30th. And that's the early one that we meet around 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning. And it's actually very close to here, so. Pardon?
Where?
It's on 422, what, I forget it's a
It's,
Well, no, it's the end of Trooper Road.
end of Trooper Road, okay,
Yeah, the big condo development. If you come down Trooper Road,
right,
basically turn left.
instead of going,
That condo development.
Go underneath the underpass,
Right.
and then turn right and go down by the river.
Right, yeah, down by the river.
so it's literally a mile or two from
Is
here.
that on the website?
What, the Charles Bender?
Yeah.
Absolutely,
Okay.
yeah,
No, I don't.
Yeah. I checked it before I came, so it's definitely on there.
It's on the calendar.
It's on the website, I didn't,
I'll
I didn't check the calendar,
I'll check on it. It's good to put the calendar, people go to it first,
okay.
I'll put it on the calendar.
Okay, yeah, that's probably a good idea. Other than that, any other questions about anything? All right, thank you.
see, how about Lou, treasurer's report? I realize I'm supposed to do that first, so I violated Roger's rules. You can impeach me if you want.
Okay, we currently have $14,447.37 in the bank. We actually paid a good number of bills this time around because we had the field day, so. Out of that, we paid $682.83 for field day expenses. I just got out tonight, there's one that I missed, so I'm gonna add one, so our total field day expenses are $769.52, unless I missed the middle one. Anybody has any more expenses, let me know. But as far as I know, everybody's been paid until you got the checks. The other thing that came out of that is the first installment to Cambridge. They actually did finally cash the first year. Yeah. Hey, I'm financial secretary of my firehouse, I know it, there's like 20 hands that touch things before I get it, so, so not a surprise, but yeah. So the second check has been sent, and then we have to send the deposit, yeah, okay, and I did send the certificate as well, that's right. Alright, we have 79 members on 8 members.
Dennis, you wanna tell us about repeaters?
Yeah, we definitely should have repeaters, that's something we should have. Marcus, for some of the newer members, Marcus kind of flush. A lot of clubs are still pining to get a 2-meter repeater because it's all new stuff. Mark has 3 2-meter frequencies, so we're a little bit of a, well enough. We have 6 repeaters in 3 locations, 2 of which are fusion repeaters, and Paoli and Darby. The only one repeater that's on here for technical reasons, and technical testing, I should say, is our 220 repeater of Darby. But interestingly, I heat up the 220 machine at Bryn Mawr.
It did?
Came up.
Yeah.
So I don't want to talk about it.
Yeah, we're on the internet now. Yeah, I found the same thing.
I'm sure my wife will have me there anytime soon.
So the two color machine just literally just turned off, and I wanted to see if there was some desensing problems. I don't get a lot of traffic on the repeaters, so it's really hard to get an idea of how it's working. I've worked a couple of people on 3.6, I monitor receiver on all the time. We changed the courtesy beep.
Yeah.
So when you listen, 3.6 is courtesy beep is high tone first, unlike 0.6, which is low tone. But anyway, as far as I can tell, it's not desensing. So the very next time we make it up to RV, which is not scheduled, but we'll certainly turn on the 220. Hopefully, we're going to make a trip to Darby because we have been limping along with a duplexer that's a little defective, and we purchased a new duplexer a couple of months back, a couple of years ago. So we have to go up and install it, and that'll help, but if anybody's used RV, it's fine, it works great, I can key it up all over the damn place, even with the duplex that's all screwed up. The 06 repeater, as Barry was just telling me, is pinning his S meter in Kennett Square running 4 watts in the we're still not running the PA, and Michael has graciously said he would come with me as we try to figure out if it's the power supply or what the hell's going on. We'll get there eventually. So that's the situation with repeaters, but some other technical things. One is there was some reports with the networking of the computers at the field base. So I did purchase split RFs, RFCs, and we wrapped the Ethernet cable a couple of times around. I put one at both ends, so it really I think it'll be a lot better the next time. I can't believe that'd be a problem. So we did that, and also we didn't get a lot of CW contacts this time. But if somebody comes and wants to operate CW, Mark doesn't own the CW iambic paddle. So I proposed that we at least purchase one on the field day equipment. Came across a very nice venture paddle. That's like half the cost of a new one. It was perfect when we got it. In fact, nobody even soldered to the 11 dots on the bottom. So it's never was used. So now Mark owns a nice venture paddle. If I know it's operating.
You bought it already?
Yeah, we were out.
Cause I'm gonna donate one block.
It's gonna have two,
Yeah, but
can you do CW with both
Still
hands?
do that. Yeah. All right, so I think that brings us up to date on all things technical.
What bands do you operate CW?
Yes, I'm an extra. I'm gonna play the whole band stuff.
What bands have been operated on CW?
Peter and I have really broke 40 to 20 bucks on all the bands, yes. Probably not so much 10 or 15, but usually 80, 40, and 20, no problem.
CW operator?
I did it.
Yeah, we didn't have a lot of CW contacts the last time, but we
But Ned, you wanna tell us a little about the breakfast?
Breakfast, Mark Eyeball QSO breakfast, this coming Saturday. 9 AM, Andy's Diner outside of Conshohocken on Ridge Pike. Easy access to pretty much the entire world, it's right off the Blue Route, right off the Northeast Extension, right off the East-West Turnpike. And remember, breakfast on cue. If you're on the repeater during talking ahead of time and you've never been to a MARC breakfast, WQ3Z will buy breakfast for you, but you do have to participate talking on the way in.
Yeah, can you get whatever you wanna get, like steak and eggs, deluxe?
Whatever,
go for it.
it's a diner, it's like, the most expensive thing they got, it's like,
You know, that requires 2 people to be on the air, otherwise you're talking to yourself.
that's one of the reasons why I'm doing this, so I'm in fact not talking to myself.
Alright, thanks Ned. Anyone else have any other announcements for the club?
We do have a fall activity coming up,
Yeah,
right?
the PAQ so party will be coming up.
And what's the name of that?
Second weekend in October,
It's on the.
October 8, 9 or something like that.
And with that as a break, I can tell you that we have now won Montgomery County multi-op for the 2nd year in a row. I already saw the preliminary results on their website
For 23.
for 23.
Well, so will we be up at the fire?
The firehouse, yeah.
So some of us can go to the races meeting. That same day, that morning, and then go over for Pennsylvania QSO, right?
Yes. Yep.
I'm looking at the other races member of the room.
I don't know.
I don't know, there should be a meeting, if that's the meeting date,
Yeah,
which is what, the second Saturday,
yeah, yeah, but I know you're gonna be. So I'm trying to generate some, are we paying for lunch?
I think we can do that, unless you'd rather pay.
Hey, I'm already for breakfast, yeah. 2 weeks.
Oh, by the way, if you're gonna do breakfast, don't put your breakfast order all together in the morning and then go to Wawa. They were not very happy when we showed up and ordered a dozen sandwiches and a dozen something all at the same time. Straight up their entire program.
So call in the night before.
Yeah. Yeah, if you're gonna buy breakfast to a work group, and there's gonna be that many. then-
Alright. Anything else?
So with the PAQSO party, I understand any member of the club can contribute to that? They don't have to be there, don't have to be there. And
I'm not sure how that works, if you contribute to the club score.
I think they can contribute.
I think you can contribute, but you'd operate under your own call sign.
Correct.
You have to signify the club when you do a submission.
And isn't it, it's like, there's a field for putting down your club, but the syntax on the club name is to be identical, otherwise they don't match it up.
It's gotta be perfect. And dash is everything,
Right.
but that's not a problem, we'll have that for you.
Alright, so there's nothing else, maybe we will move on to tonight's main presentation. I'm glad we had a lot to talk about at the business meeting. A lot of different things going on here. So tonight's speaker will be Barry, K3 EUI, who should be very well known to all of us, a man who needs no introduction. He's been a physics teacher for more years than most of us can remember. Is that right?
Most of you have been a lot.
That too. He's given us a couple of different presentations, and tonight he's here to tell us about capacitors. What are they and how do they work? Sure, this is working. There we go.
So how do I fast, how do I work?
Forward is the down button.
Down.
So it's the opposite of what you think.
Okay, good evening all. First, I'm a former high school 9th grade physics teacher. And I don't like to lecture or give a talk where there's no interaction. So quite a few of the slides are going to ask a question of the group. And what I'd like you to do is talk to the person next to you and compare your answers. We don't have to start yet, but as long as you have a partner. If you don't, if your partner next to you won't talk, just move your seat. Find someone to talk to. Because I really like this to be more interactive. And I find every time I do a talk like this, I learn something. Either from the questions or a different answer than I was thinking. If you have a question, just interrupt me and call it out. That's what my 9th graders did all the time. You're gonna have to raise your hand. Don't wait for the end of the talk because you'll forget the question you had. Is that a deal?
Yeah.
And how much time do I have?
Including the test.
The test. Yes, how much time?
Hour.
All right, I can do it. So one of the things I learned from teaching high school, especially the younger kids, is you should know your subject, but know your subjects. And I know a lot about you folks, but you're at very, very different levels of technical expertise. So how do you present a talk about capacitors to some engineers and professors and those of us who are perhaps not that knowledgeable? So this is going to be a wide net thrown out, and I'm not going to do any math beyond about 4th grade. So it's not a math lesson. But hams use capacitors all the time. When I was 12 or 13 years old, this was 1950s, there was no internet, there was no website, all that stuff, but I could buy these ARRL license manuals, real little paper booklet. And I read through the novice exam, it was called novice back then. And there were, I don't know, maybe 100 questions. And I just read the thing through like 20 times until I memorized every question, every answer. It was all multiple choice. And I passed it with flying colors, but I didn't know a thing. If someone had said, how does a transistor work? What's a transistor? I don't know. Well, back then, mostly too. But
Nobody knew what a transistor was.
very difficult. But to say that you can get a ham radio license and have a lot of fun with the hobby without knowing very much. It was only until I got to college and started to look at a lot of the basic fundamental physics behind electronics, they started to figure out things like, well, how does a capacitor really work? So what I'd like to do is kind of go back and take a look at this component called a capacitor. Actually, my ninth graders, when I taught AC circuits, they, for some reason, they always called them capacitors. I mean, I look, how do you get capacitator, but I think they're thinking food, tater tots or something, I don't know. But they had all, and well, they also called them impedance impedance, but that was for a different reason. So, yeah, so capacitors, what are they? How do they work? I brought a little demo here, but I'll wait to the end to show this, it's so crude. So again, interrupt me as soon as you see there's a question. So let's see if this works. So when Jeremy said, come up with a topic, I thought, I pressed the down arrow, right?
You're fine, I just need to,
So you are on show the whole slide.
oh, I gotta change to, no, it's not that one, it's that one.
I think we would bring back capacitor.
There it is, now it's working.
All right, so usually what I do, I'm not sure why I do it this way, but I think of a topic and research it for maybe a week or two and come up with a whole ton of interesting things I think are interesting. And I take a few notes, but I throw together slides after slides after slides. So I end up in the beginning with like way too much material. Then I realize, all right, so got 40 minutes or something. I'm not going to show 300 slides. But what would be of most interest? So what I found difficult for me over the last 3 days was culling through my 100 or 200 slides of what might be interesting for you folks. So I hope I did a good job culling these things. There's two parts, I think, to this. One is, I don't want to stand so you can't see it. One is, so, you know, the fundamental stuff, what are capacitors, how do we use them? The second part's more interesting to me from a physics point of view is, how do they really work? What is this thing called reactance? Why are capacitors used in filters? All this kind of stuff. So I'm not going to try to get into the more challenging, I think, mathematical part. I'll stay with the practical stuff. Let's see if this works. Hey, so the first quiz is, what did the capacitor say to the electron? Anyone can take a guess. It's a joke. What did the capacitor say to the electron?
Stop being so negative.
Well, I like that better than mine.
Yes.
Ah, you guys came up with better answers.
You shall not ask.
You have potential. Oh, I have to do it this way. Hey, Jeremy. Now it's not working.
Not working again.
So do I just press the down arrow here? I can.
Right arrow.
Right arrow. Okay. Well, you revolt me. I don't know.
It's good.
You can come up with a lot of things. Start like. So, this I found, yeah, maybe right. This I found was a difficult question. What is a capacitor? Anyone want to hazard a definition? How does capacitor differ from other things we use, resistors and wires, fuses? What do all capacitors share in common? Now you two can't.
They're storage devices,
Yeah, what's it storing?
electricity.
Yeah, they store energy.
And
How do they store energy?
I'll find out before this is over.
Well, they work the opposite of inductors. Inductors or coils store energy in a magnetic field. So all capacitors store energy in an electric field. So that's one way to define it. By what it does, it stores energy, usually temporarily, but could be for a long time. Dennis called me a mister before we started. If you're old enough, you might remember you or someone you knew older than you. Capacitors used to be called condensers. I remember as a kid talking to a bunch of, like for me, it wasn't an old timer. And they were talking about Mickey Mouse condensers, and I thought, I passed my test. I never heard of Mickey Mouse condenser. Why would a capacitor be called a condenser? Check with your neighbor, see if you have any idea. If you've ever heard that, condense.
I've heard the term in movies from the 40s.
Yeah.
Automotive circles, they call it capacitors, that's the points of condenser of the distributor.
Yes.
Ah,
Yes.
okay. Yes. The Leyden jar was a way mechanically within the jar with the insulator, plates to store energy. You can make a capacitor easily out of common materials. Yeah, in a way they condense the energy into a small segment. You don't hear the term condensers anymore.
They don't make clowns, so.
Oh. So we could say capacitor is just anything that stores energy. Yeah. Sit down now. So capacitor is anything that'll store energy in an electric field. So what's an electric field? Is where what imaginary lines of force exist. You can get into a lot of theoretical stuff if you try to get further than that, but as different from, transformers, resistors, plugs, antennas. So I had this, but as I was clearing out my shack, we moved QSY to Crosslands down at Kennett Square, and I demolished my almost entire radio shack and got rid of thousands of parts. This was one I should have kept, but I had a nice big capacitor, rated about 15 volts, 120,000 microfarad, which when it was made, big. They're often used in power supplies for store charge, and then they distribute it, store it, and distribute it. That's a typical capacitor. Little tiny things and a whole lot smaller than that. Actually, there's a box that I sent around. If you haven't seen that, take a look at some capacitors I kept from in my junk box. So little ceramic capacitors, far smaller than that. In fact,
I'll send you a couple of surface models in the mail.
they got really small. I have a couple of these I did save. These were typically tuning capacitors, air variable with plates that mesh. And these came out of old AM radios, which you could junk and not pay anything for. Even coax cable I found makes a pretty good capacitor based on the length and based on the diameter of the kind of coax. So we don't usually think of coax cable as a capacitor, but I have a 10-meter vertical where the capacitor is part of a coax matching set, Cushcraft A10. So basically you have two conductors and an insulator. The insulator is the dielectric, the polyethylene, polyfoam, whatever it is. And RG213, the typical half-inch cable, it's about 30 picofarad per foot. So if you have 2 foot, 10 foot, you can roughly estimate the value of the capacity. And basically a coax cable is, concentric, so you have a conductor, an insulator, and an inner wire. And the capacitance is due to the fact that if there's negative charge out here and positive charge in here, and an insulator between, you can store energy from that electric field. So besides carrying, currents back and forth to your antenna, coax can act as a capacitor. So we usually model a capacitor as simply two conductors with a separation that's not a conductor. It could be air, it could be anything. So two parallel plates is the way we usually visualize it. The space between the plates could be air, could be a vacuum, or could be almost anything. Yeah.
Maybe it's a silly question, but why was the positive charge in the middle of that diagram in the last slide and not the negative?
You can move it any way you want.
Oh, okay.
There's nothing about positive. It has to be just opposite charge.
Oh, okay.
I can make the inner conductor positive or negative if I hook it up to a battery backwards.
Okay.
Good question.
Thank you.
The dielectric is kind of the key to making a capacitor more functional, because you can get dielectrics that will store more energy within a certain volume of space. Mica, glass, oil. So typically when we think about a capacitor, you think about it as two plates. The plates would have an area A, a separation D. But actually when you make these out of some sort of a foil to make it practical, then you just roll it up, put wires on the inside and outside, and there are a couple of those. Something like this would be just like that.
Make it out of paper too.
Yeah.
Take 2 sheets of tin foil and a piece of paper, you roll it up like a cigar.
Yeah. So the word capacitor and capacitance, let's be a little more specific here. The capacitance of a capacitor, that's the unit, is directly proportional into how big the capacitor is, the area of the plates. But it's inversely proportional to the distance between them, meaning as the plates get closer, the capacitance goes up. So we can say C is proportional to area divided by distance between them. If you want to make a bigger capacitor, you can make the area bigger or the distance between less, or both. This is a trickier one. Often between the two plates, there's something that's not air, but something else. Paper, glass, mica, oil, yeah, lots of different. What does that actually do? This thing called the dielectric, what does it do? The diagram almost gives it away.
That's the displacement.
Yeah, so I didn't want to get too technical, but if this is negative and this is positive, it sets up the opposite field in the dielectric, which kind of reduces the electric field between the two plates. Is that good or bad?
It is.
You can store more energy within the given capacitor if it's a certain size by putting in a high dielectric between them. So it acts in a sense as an amplifier of the capacitance. So here's an example. If you have plus and minus charges that somehow get separated on the two plates, when you throw in a dielectric, these atoms or molecules here line up in an opposite way, opposites attract. So this is the positive, the negatives line up here, positives line up here. So in a sense, what you've done is reduce the electric field between the two plates.
Does that allow for more charge on the plate?
Yes, more energy, more charge for getting voltage, yes. Good question. So the dielectrics that are common in typical capacitors, you can see here. So the dielectric constant, vacuum is 1, so that gives you an idea. So a vacuum doesn't do anything to amplify the capacitor. But some of these are pretty big, quartz, glass, and there's some that aren't on here that are even higher now, depending on the nature of the molecules of the thing. And that gets into very fancy physics, but
I worry about the water, it's probably the standard.
it depends on what we call water, because usually water out of a tap has got all kinds of ions and stuff. I never tried making a capacitor before, so I don't know. So the important thing here is the capacitance, kind of the value of this gadget, is proportional to K, the constant, assuming it's not 1. A, the area, and then D, the diameter. So you can sort of predict how to make a capacitor of a given capacitance physically if you know those three quantities. So manufacturers obviously have to plan it this way. So how does the charge get on the plates? I mean, like with 9th grade, we'd have a great discussion about this. So a battery. Well, we don't have a lot of detail about what we call a battery, but the kids kind of know there's a positive and negative, and comes in 1.5, 3, 6, 9 volts. Volts means more oomph. So when you attach a battery with conducting wires to two plates and let it sit there for some time, maybe a fraction of a second, the negative side of the battery can have electrons migrate and pile up here. So eventually there's a charge here from the battery's negative side, and any electrons on these atoms, because they're made out of things like aluminum, the electrons here migrate this way and get, in a sense, drawn into the positive side of the battery. So eventually the capacitor gets charged to the same voltage as the battery that it's attached to. Does that concept make sense? Sort of like I mean, I'll do an example for 9th grade kids. If you have a soccer ball and it's not inflated, you start pumping air into pump. First, it's real easy, isn't it? If you've ever done this, pump up a tire in high school. Pump. Soccer ball starts to fill with air. But you notice after a while, it's a little harder to get the air in as it gets filled up. Why is that? When you're pumping up a tire, a bicycle tire, a basketball, a football, it doesn't matter what. At first it's real easy, but as you get close to the maximum, it's real hard to get a little more air in. And you feel it with your muscles, like, that lasts, and then you pull it out. Why is that high? So the pressure is high in what?
In the soccer ball.
Yeah, so eventually what you're doing is fighting what the soccer ball's trying to do. The soccer ball's trying to combat the atmospheric pressure. You're forcing this air in through your mechanical energy. So eventually you can charge a capacitor up to the battery's voltage. But then it stops. Why does it stop? Why doesn't the charge keep accumulating more and more and more and more and more? Well, if you stop pumping, the basketball or the tire is not going to keep getting higher and higher pressure. There's a good analogy, I think, with that. At least my ninth graders, wanted to try it with basketball just to be sure I was right. There you go. Give it a try. Now we get into a little bit more of a, so what does this mean if two plates now have two different charges attached to them? What if I disconnect the battery? I take the battery away, and this capacitor is not connected to anything. What happens to the charges that are on the plates? Check that with your neighbor.
They stay there.
What happens to the charges that were put on the plates by that battery?
They stay.
Stay, is it pure rules, these stay.
They stay, they don't go anywhere. They don't leak off into the air, they don't.
That's how good it is.
Yeah.
Unless the battery, unless the capacitor has a slight.
Yeah, so the perfect capacitor would stay charged, it could stay charged for a year. In fact, it was kind of fun after the kids learned what this is all about. They charge a capacitor and just leave it on the table.
Nah.
Oh, someone would come by and pick it up. Oh, what's this? And they gotta shut up. There you go. Okay, so far? Nothing beyond sixth grade math.
You said fourth grade.
No, I'm moving it up here. So here's the biggest misconception. And it is a big misconception. Batteries do not supply the electrons that charge a capacitor. Batteries do not supply the electrons that charge the capacitor. The batteries just move. They move the electrons that were already there on the plates. You see a difference? What's the function of the battery? It doesn't supply the electrons, it supplies the what? To charge the capacitor. What's the what? Energy would be a good thing. The electric field, the push, the oomph, the reason. Okay. So the electrons were never stored in the battery. In fact, if you look at a battery, I thought I brought. If you look at a battery, it has a plus and a minus, sure. What's the net charge inside a battery? If you add up all the positive charge and negative charge, what's the net charge of a battery? Zero. What's the net charge of an uncharged capacitor? Zero. What's the net charge of a charged capacitor?
Whatever the battery.
Zero.
Battery.
Yeah, it's still zero.
Ah,
Because the capacitor, the capacitor has a negative plate and a positive plate, and they just offset. So the capacitor itself, if you draw a circle around it, has no net charge. But the charges have been separated, and we know like charges will attract, but unless they cross the gap between them, a capacitor will stay charged a long period of time. So batteries supply the energy, batteries don't supply the electrons. Or you might say, if you're maybe an engineer type, batteries supply the electric field that pushes the charges around the circuit. We don't quite say it, but we do.
Well, if that's the case, if I were to measure the current going into the battery, I would see current flow.
Yeah, a physicist might say there's no such thing as current flow. There's charge that flows, or there's current. But current flow is kind of redundant, because current is already saying something is moving.
Well, current is time rate of change of charge.
Yeah, I know, that's a more technical way to say. So in an uncharged capacitor, just sitting on the table, the two plates contain atoms. Atoms are normally neutral, so there's no net charge on the capacitor. The net charge on the atom is zero, the net charge on either plate is zero, and the overall net charge is still zero if it's an uncharged capacitor that's sitting on the table. Connected to a battery, allow it sufficient time to charge up. Sufficient time might be a millionth of a second. Now what happens? What's the net charge on the capacitor? It's still zero, but the charges have been pulled apart. That's one of the biggest misconceptions I find teaching high school physics. In fact, I was substituting one day in an AP physics class, and they were working with fancy formulas, and these were brilliant kids down at Delaware. And I thought I'll throw a brainer at them. I said, well, what's the net charge on a battery? And it's like, what? That's not on the AP test. I said, I know it's not on the test, but tell me what, you know. So we got into some of the fundamentals and I realized they didn't know a lot. But they could answer very technical questions and move formulas and do things on our calculators. But they missed some of the basic third grade concepts about electricity. It's just the nature of. So the net charge on any capacitor is still 0. So let me stop for a minute. Does that concept make sense?
It's in.
The capacitor has energy because the charges have been pulled apart, but the net charge is still.
It really, it blows up because if I take a capacitor and put it in, well, it's a conductor, I'll see a spark, right?
Yes,
So obviously there's charge there.
there's no net charge, I said. The net charge on the capacitor is always 0, no matter what you do.
Fill out that piece of aluminum that I just made a spoon on.
Yeah, I don't agree with that at all. The net charge on the thing called the capacitor is 0, although the charges are +0 and -0. So when you connect them with a circuit or your finger or a screwdriver, certainly the charges can migrate back and forth and neutralize the capacitor, make a big spark. I mean, the kids love to do that. But the net charge is still 0, even while you're discharging. The net charge is
Plus
0.
and minus on each plate. That's fine.
Yes, but the net charge,
And if I put a conceptual circle, yes, net is.
that's what I'm doing. I'm teaching third graders. Okay, so there is many negative charges on one plate as there are positive charges on the other. Dennis and I just agreed to it. The charges were simply moved from one plate to the other. They didn't originate in the battery. The battery just moved the charges over.
So is it like the number of electrons on each side are the same, or is it like do both sides have to be the exact same size of like aluminum?
No, the number of electrons are different on the two plates because electrons are negative. If there are 50 electrons on one plate, they're missing 50 electrons on the other plate. So missing a minus means it's plus. The only thing that'll move in the circuit are the electrons through the wires because the protons can't move.
Oh, okay.
That's a good question. So the net charge, is that okay? The net charge when the batteries are connected. I asked the ninth graders to come up with a skit that proves this concept. That's a hard question. That's not on the FCC exam. So one of my ninth grade teams, they had a day to think about this. I like to throw weird questions at them because they come up with brilliant solutions. So a team of 3 or 4 ninth grade kids, young teenagers, came in with a big box that I think like a refrigerator came. And the box had 2 holes in it. And as we know, one of the kids was in the box. Okay. And so there were 2 kids on this side that were passing yellow tennis balls. And the yellow tennis balls went in one of the holes in the box. And what came out the other hole on the other side of the box? Tennis balls that were green instead of yellow. What were they trying to show? The electrons that go into one side of a capacitor are not the same electrons that come out off the other plate. They're different electrons.
There's no current flow through a capacitor.
Yes, well, that's what they were showing. That electrons went in and different electrons went out, but nothing actually went through the center. That's a hard concept to grasp, I think.
Where they come
And they came from the plates themselves, because the plates, aluminum, had
They have extra electrons.
well, chemists wouldn't call them extra, and they might call them valence electrons, or electrons on the outer edge of the atom that you open and they can move. So for the same reason, aluminum, gold, copper are good conductors. They have outermost electrons in each atom that are easy to get off the atom. That's a really good question, but that's a different problem. Why does anything conduct electricity? Because these outer electrons are able to migrate between atoms. Anyway, I thought that was a very clever way they illustrated that the electrons that go in one plate are not the same electrons that go through the capacitor and come out the other side. So they illustrated that with different colored tennis balls. They got an A. Yeah, it was a great demonstration. They understood it. So capacitance, this is a little tricky. Capacitance, like resistance, conductance, it's a word, it has a name. So we say the capacitance of a capacitor is simply the ratio of two other things. The charge, Q, divided by the voltage, V. Q, coulombs. Coulombs are a bunch of charge, like you can think of it as a dozen electrons, except it's a bigger number. So the capacitance is just how much charge goes on one of the plates, Q, divided by what's the voltage that ends up on sides of the plates of the capacitor. Yeah. So it's a simple ratio, Q over V. C is measured in these units called farads, but a farad is a huge amount of charge. Q is measured in units called coulombs, which is just like a bunch of electrons. And of course, V is in volts. Kind of know what that is. So 1 farad would be defined as 1 coulomb creating 1 volt across the capacitor. So when you go to buy a capacitor in the store, the first question you probably have to answer is like, so what size capacitor do you want? I don't mean size in inches or square, feet, but what's the capacitance? Like if you go to buy a resistor, I'd say, you need a couple 100 ohm resistors. I need a couple capacitors that are 0.1 farad or something. So farads are coulombs per volt. That's its definition. So remember that formula, Q divided by V. I talked to a number of CAMs who describe capacitance this way. It's a strange saying. It's how much a capacitor can hold. And they use the word hold. I'm not sure in electrical terms what is hold. The amount of charge a capacitor can hold, maybe they mean before it sparks or demolishes or blows up or something. That's not a very satisfactory definition, but that's a lot. I think some people think of it that way. How much charge a capacitor holds, maybe even how much energy a capacitor. I don't think that's very effective because, hold, what does that mean? So a simple view, a really simple view is just pretend the V, the denominator is 1. So now capacitance is how much charge do you need on one plate, not on both, because that's 0. How much charge do you need on one plate to create a voltage of 1 volt across the 2 plates? I think then it's easy to visualize. Higher value capacitance needs more charge per 1 volt. Smaller capacitance needs less charge to create 1 volt. So the 1 volt is always measured between the 2 plates, positive and negative. So quiz time. Capacitor A has a charge of 3 microcoulombs a million. 3 microcoulombs, and it has a voltage of 3 volts across the plates. Capacitor B has a charge of 6 microcoulombs, and it creates a voltage of 6 volts across the plates. Which capacitor has the greater value of capacitance? So check with your names. My ninth graders would argue much more than you guys. So of course they're the same. It's the same ratio. So the capacitance could be defined as simply Q over V. Whatever V is, whatever Q is, figure out the ratio. A so far, right? Now we're going to get a little tricky. Since C is Q divided by V, let's just do a little math and solve this equation for Q. You could say cross multiply by the V or multiply both sides by V. Anyway, isolate Q, and Q would be the product of C and V. Is that okay, algebra 1? Maybe it's a little beyond there. So now think of this formula as Q, the amount of charge, is simply the capacitance times the voltage. Capacitance times. So how much charge would transfer from the battery, 1.5 volts, to a capacitor, 10 microfarads? The little mu there is a millionth of a farad. Take a minute, check with your neighbor, see if you can do that mentally in your head without a calculator. How much charge Q will the capacitor take when you close the switch? Check with your neighbor. 15 microfarads. 15. I heard 15. Remember, it's 10 microfarads. Q equals C times V. Easily multiply 10. Don't forget that micro. So someone just said microcoulombs. Yeah, so Q. 10 microfarads times 1.5 volts, so you get 15 microcoulombs. That's kind of typical, you could read that scenario. Now we'll get a little bit beyond maybe third grade here. So here's a chart or a graph showing Q versus V. And there's 3 capacitors, capacitor A and B and C. Check with your neighbor which capacitor, A or B or C, is the greater value of the capacitance, which is the bigger capacitance. A, B, or C? A little more silence here. Check with your neighbor, see if your neighbor.
Which one? So saying.
My ninth graders would always figure out it's the opposite of what I'm leading to, but then sometimes it isn't. It's a good teaching issue though. I had 3 ninth grade classes, morning, after lunch. And I gave 10 questions, true false quiz. I forget what it was about, something. But the quiz I gave to the morning classes, the answers were all true. 10, all true. After lunch, I changed the quiz. And I changed the wording, so the answers were all false. You know how many ninth graders turned in that second quiz after lunch? True. Like, even if they knew nothing, they should get 5 out of 10. So we had a good discussion about what are you talking about at lunch about your physics stuff. Right. And maybe you shouldn't be sharing the answers to your quizzes. So they were quite embarrassed, but someone said, I knew you were gonna do
If there's
that.
a copy from anybody, copy from somebody who knows what they're doing.
Yeah, that's good. So what's the answer? A or B or C, or are they all the same? A. Why?
Because for a given voltage, A has inverse Q.
That's a good way, I think, to think about it. For a given voltage, like pick a number here. Then come up, C has this much charge, B has this, so A has more charge per volt. Well, that's capacity. So the answer is A. Good job. So if C is Q over B, Q is CB, and then, oh, I went the wrong way. So yeah, capacitor A would have more charge for any given value of voltage. Some of the kids would say also, since it's a graph, it has what, a higher value of magic word. And algebra. Slope, yeah. So the slope would represent what? Q equals CV, the slope is the capacitance. Higher slope, bigger, steeper graph, more capacitance. So, yeah, that's just something. Algebra 1 there. Sorry, we got up to ninth grade algebra 1.
Now we're ninth grade.
Yeah, we're moving up. We're
gonna be grads.
So we're getting there, but my time is almost done. So large value of capacitors, big capacitors have either very large plate areas, they're physically big, I brought some. They have very teeny separations without shorting out. Or maybe they have very large dielectrics. You can buy now the size of a quarter, a 1 farad capacitor. It only works at about 2 volts maybe, but it's like, that's a huge amount of technology put into a little device. A lot of capacitance in a small space. So capacitors, if you want to look them up on charts or buy something, they come in the micro, that's 10 to the -6 times another millionth of a million picofarad.
That term is not recognized.
Yeah, a lot of the old timers though would call them Mickey Mouse capacitors, meaning micro picofarad. You don't see micro anymore, but I remember hearing that phrase when I was a kid. Nanofarads, a lot of nano things like micro, milli, you don't see that much, and just farad. Farad is like
Jeremy's gotta tell us what 10 to the -15 is.
yeah. The other important thing if you buy capacitors, what's the voltage rating? Because you don't want the capacitor to blow up or spark or get ruined. So these often have what's called a working voltage. If you exceed that, you're likely going to spark and burn out. WV, a working voltage. So I ordered one of these, and this was going to be my demo from Amazon, but it didn't arrive yet. Probably coming from Korea, Japan, or Taiwan or something. 100,000 microfarads up to 50 volts. So that would be a tank like this, pretty big, good sized capacitor. So I brought a much smaller one to do a little demo, but I wanted to show if I charge a capacitor, even with a little hand crank generator. I can store a significant amount of energy in that, and then I was gonna light up a light bulb, see how long it lights up.
It now, 100,000 microfarad,
So it's 0.1 farad,
right, that it's like,
and it'd be about the size of 3 of my fists.
yeah.
It just sounds better if you say 100,000.
I was just saying,
Yeah, notice it has a positive and negative, up here they have positive and negative, but you may not see that in the photo. And it says 50 volts, then it has a temperature, don't exceed 105 degrees or bracket. But that's a typical big capacitor that might be used in power supplies,
And that's 105 degrees Celsius,
yes,
that's pretty hot.
yes,
This is.
yeah. Yeah, yes,
Can you define capacitance in terms of like amps and volts? Does that not really
now,
make sense?
that would be much trickier because it's like apples to oranges, to
Okay.
grapefruits to, you know.
Okay, I got it.
Once you put it in a circuit, you can define capacitance as how fast the charge will move into a circuit. Then that's what it's getting at that. But, you know. This is a common one, I brought one, yeah.
Why is an electrolytic capacitor polarized?
Well, that's way beyond what I wanted to talk about tonight, maybe we can talk right after. There's no quick answer to that.
Yeah.
Some capacitors have a positive and negative, and they say, don't reverse it or you burn them out. Some capacitors are what are called non-polar, they're more used in like sending circuits, like in speaker circuits and stuff. So the dielectric between them, or the plates themselves have materials that only kind of work one way. Right.
Yeah, the coatings.
I don't know if
that.
I don't know a simple answer to that, that's a really good question.
Yeah, if you go backwards and put too much voltage, they'll let out natural smoke.
Yeah.
Have you ever had that happen?
Yes.
Yeah, in fact, it's one of those, this is a microlytic. Maverick, 100 microfarads, 450 volts, but if you reverse the voltage, you burn this thing. I brought a couple of these in, these were very, very common in the old days to tune a radio.
Yeah.
Therefore, you can find a
I
circle.
still have antenna tuners.
Yeah, that's my last slide.
Yeah, really.
So when I show a handfest, I often look for like the MARC handfest. I forget the one guy who sits up outside. He has some humongous inductors and capacitors. And if I have $10 and I'm leaving, I'm thinking, what can I get for $10? Often I'll buy one of these big capacitors. He sells from Collins aircraft radios or something. So how might hams use capacitors? So one of the obvious ways is store energy in a power supply. So that's where you get these big electrolytic capacitors. They can store energy and then dump it in the circuit. Store energy and dump it. Because usually a power supply is to plug it in to an AC circuit, and what comes out of the power supply is DC or close to DC. So these capacitors are expensive and vital parts of the supply. Acts as filters, I'll show you what that is in a minute. Determine the resonant circuit, like the typical capacitor inductor, and you tune it. Tune out reactance with an antenna tuner. That was my last slide, but I'm trying to run it out. So here's a typical little power supply that might have come out of here or something. So you see the different components, a couple capacitors and inductor capacitors here. They're commonly used in power supplies because simply to get a smooth DC like battery-like voltage, you need to take out the little bumps or the ripples produced in all these power supplies. Capacitors do that easily. They may be like, $1 or $2 components if you buy them separately. So one of the fun things I used to do with the 9th grade was hook up a speaker to a little radio or a little amplifier, and we turn on music. And then, of course, they had to pick the music, but they're playing something, boom, 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 whatever they're playing. And I say, look, there's 2 wires going to the speaker. What if we disconnect one of the wires? Will you still hear some sound? And I thought, yeah, why not? You disconnected, nothing. So I said, well, let's disconnect the other wire, put the first wire back. In other words, to get sound, you need the 2 wires. So they got the idea that something's going into the speaker and also something's coming out. That is, the charges are going both ways. This is like how I would introduce AC versus DC. I said, okay, so we had talked about capacitors. I said, well, what if we put a little resistor, like a 10 ohm resistor, something not big, and a capacitor between the amplifier and the speaker? In other words, we're gonna let the charges coming out of the amplifier go through a resistor, and if they went through a capacitor, will that change the sound? I thought, I would have changed the sound. So we started to look into how does a capacitor work? And the fact that they knew when they built this big capacitor box, when you start to throw charges onto a capacitor, charge the capacitor, just like pump up the tire, it's harder to get those additional electrons on the capacitor. The capacitor is sort of acting like a battery in reverse. Just like when you pump up the tire, it's hard to get that last bit of air into the tire. So the capacitor can easily pass a very quick moving variable frequency like dee 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 rather than do 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 sound. The higher the pitch, the higher the frequency. Those sounds can get through a capacitor pretty easily. Well, they're not sound yet until it hits the speaker, but the electrical signal. So the capacitor sort of shunts or throws into the ground side high frequencies. So when we did this, it acts as what we hams call a low pass filter. What does that mean? When you're listening to music, all they heard was thump, 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 thump. They lost all the mid-range and the high frequencies. They couldn't hear it. They never got to the speaker. And they thought, oh, well, where did those high frequencies go? Well, they got shorted from here right back. They get grounded, what we call it, shunted or grounded. That was kind of interesting that the capacitor, if I hook it up this way, can be a low pass filter, meant lets the low frequencies get through. The low frequencies are low pitch sounds. What if I reverse it though? Ah, they already kind of knew something about capacitors. What if now you put the capacitor in the lead going to the speaker and the resistor shining is on? Now what happens? Check with your neighbor. If your neighbor can figure this out. We're gonna force the sound while it's still electrical current to get through the Well, remember, it's not sound until it actually gets to the speaker. So this circuit is between the amplifier and the speaker.
Block DC capacities.
Will definitely block DC, yeah.
So.
So what will we hear out of the speaker? That's kind of the next.
Higher frequencies.
So we won't hear any of the low pitched sounds. And now when they listen to music, it sounds like so awful, you know. So what is the capacitor doing? It's acting as what we hams call a filter. It's a selective, throwing the low frequencies, stopping the low frequencies from getting through and allowing higher frequencies. So all this would lead to a second hour talk, which I'm not going to do, called what? Reactance. So we're kind of comfortable with the word resistance, right?
Right.
Resistance. So reactance is like a resistance, but for AC circuits, for a alternating current. The higher frequencies can get through a capacitor quite easily. The low frequencies and DC get blocked. So a capacitor could be used by hams in a filter kind of circuit. So if you see a little knob that says treble bass adjust, you're likely going to be changing some circuit like this, at least in the old days.
What happens if you take the resistor out?
You tell me. Good question.
You block any DC that's coming in.
Yeah, but an amplifier is not going to produce DC. And I used to joke with the kids,
Yeah.
what if you connect a battery to the speaker? Nothing you got tonight. And I did this. I took a 12-volt battery, a big 12-inch speaker, and I said, what if we connect the 12-volt battery directly to the speaker in time of playing the music? What will happen? And they thought, probably going to break the speaker. So when I did that, the speaker cone went, but then it didn't make any sound. And then someone I was hoping was going to say, what if you reverse the battery connections? The plus and minus. And now the speaker went full. So I said, well, what if we had a switch that could rapidly switch the polarity of the battery? And I had one. And the speaker went pum, 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 pum. So I said, well, I can't switch it very fast. I'm going to connect it to a little audio oscillator. And I set the audio oscillator to 5 hertz. Cranked up the voltage, and the speaker did this. They couldn't hear it, but they could see the speaker. I said, well, let's make it a little faster, 10 hertz, 20 hertz. By the time I got to about 30 hertz, they said, hey, I can hear the sound coming out of that speaker. And then we turned up 300, 3,000, and they said, ah. So it was kind of fun to see the analogy of making the sound by varying the frequency of the electrical signal. So just to say, capacitors can act as filters depending on height.
And your ears do too.
Yeah.
Go up to 15 kilohertz.
Yeah, all right, that's pretty bad. So Dennis asked the question, how about an antenna tuner? So capacitors or inductors are typically what are called, and this leads to much beyond third or sixth grade math, an impedance matching circuit. Well, that means what? What's impedance? What? Now where are we? So impedance, lots of my ninth graders always call it, they, and they looked at me for a reaction, so no, yeah. Call it what you want, impedance, impedance. I said, you better spell it correct. So, impedance is like resistance, but for an AC circuit. And it has two components, any resistance and any reactance. So reactance is kind of a resistance that inductors and coils exhibit. If you invite me back, that's part two. So if you hook up a capacitor and a coil or inductor and they're variable, you can get it so that some antenna will work with some radio, even though it's a mismatch. And it's very clever design called an L network, only need are two parts. But you can hook them up in different ways depending on what you're trying to do. In my case, I moved to a new location, Handle Crosslands Retirement Community, and I had to sort of hide the antennas, especially 84 meter antennas.
I went to HLN.
Yeah, so one of the issues was, can I use one of their rain gutters as my antenna? They have rain gutters everywhere, and there's one that's about 50 feet long, it's horizontal. I thought NBIS is perfect antenna. It's under a canopy and people aren't gonna walk by very often. So I thought, oh, I wanna hook up a rain gutter to my 25 watt HF rig. So I had to do it by coming up with a circuit like this, whereas my radio was happy producing 50 watts into this thing. So a rain gutter is sort of a random impedance. And I had to play with the components until I could get it to work. Sure enough, I got it to work. I felt a little bad that I was kind of radiating the neighborhood, so I didn't do that. But this is one of the typical values for, capacitors and inductors.
Nobody can watch Channel 3.
So I was gonna bring this tuner in, but I thought that's too big and heavy to carry, but this is my tuner. This is a very, very well built, very nice, very wide range tuner. Now, some of these are called tuners, some are called matchers or matchboxes, they all do the same thing.
Matchbox.
They don't really tune the antenna up in the woods or something, but they provide a proper impedance for your radio to see 50 ohms. So when I opened this up, and I was gonna open it up, but I thought I was pretty heavy to carry. So it looks like this. So here's an inductor that you can, by turning this crank, make it less or more or less coil, changing the inductance. And here are two really big, heavy capacitors. Components like this are like $50 each, so that's what makes it expensive. So that's part two, to show how do capacitors really work in these tuning devices. What's impedance? What's reactance? How does it go together? And maybe if I got lucky, we'd get to something called a conjugate match. It almost sounds like infinite.
Don't you get those when you're in prison?
Conjugate match.
Conjugal.
Time for questions. So before I take questions, here's my little demo. Oh yeah, let's do this. So I found that, especially with ninth graders, rather than hooking up batteries to capacitors, the battery was kind of a mystery. What's inside a battery, and they of course wanted to take them apart. But I thought this is a little better because to generate a voltage, you do it. So you do work on this thing. So it's a little hand crank generator. So this is connected with this switch over to a capacitor, this blue thing, and I have a voltmeter connected across the capacitor. So as I turn this, I'm going to force charge to go through one wire, other charge to come back the other wire, right? It's a little circuit. DC.
So it's okay.
If I turn it the wrong way, which someone did a minute ago, it won't work. So I'm gonna crank this and I want you to watch the voltmeter. Oh, let me see if I can get this in. All right.
Why don't you come under the table so you can see?
Yeah.
Come on now.
So as I turn this, watch the voltmeter. So it's reading about 6 volts. So it's saying there's something across the capacitor giving it a voltage. And I need someone to help me up here. So just open the switch. Don't throw it, just open it. Yeah, okay. So now the capacitor is not connected to anything. Except the voltage. And it reads, I was hoping it still reads 6 volts. So it reads a little less than 5 volts.
It's pretty close.
Let's charge it back up a little. Let's throw it this way and I'll.
That's the original?
Yeah. Okay, and open it. Good. So now it's actually charged to about 9 volts. So the battery is disconnected. So that is it. The capacitor is indicating across the 2 plates is about 8 volts. Why?
It's charged.
What does that mean? Yeah.
There's electrons waiting to be put to use.
Oh, that's a good, that's very good. I like that. What's the net charge on the capacitor right now?
0.
But the capacitor has some energy. How do I know that? Well, why don't we connect something else to the capacitor? So if I throw the switch in the other direction here, I'll connect a little light bulb. Little lamp. Let's try it. Can everyone see that? Oh, it lit up. Oh, but now it went out. So why did it light up? Why do light bulbs light up? Lamps.
Electrons were moving from one plate to the other.
Charges went flying through that little light bulb, and the light bulb is a really, really thin wire called the filament. And when it charges, electrons in this case try to get through that filament, they hit the atoms of the filament, creates heat. So all these little lamps of this style, incandescent, they make light by making heat, the old style. Like that. So it lit up pretty bright. The light bulb says on it, it's designed for about 6 volts. And remember, the capacitor was charged to about 6 volts. So when I tried a 2-volt lamp and threw the switch, guess what happened this morning? I burned it out. Right? Oh, come on. Physics teacher, I just burn out 1 volt. So yeah, you want to put the lamp in here that's about the same voltage as you're going to get. Now, what I could do is connect the generator directly to the bulb. In fact, let's do that. Just to show I can bypass the capacitor altogether. See if this will work.
I predict it's not gonna work too well,
Why?
because you're not gonna be able to get enough current flowing. Unless you
Spin it fast.
Pretty strong. All right, well, let's see. So this is a little GenCom, little $20 pan generator. Let's see if I get the light. The capacitor is disconnected. Right?
If you can get it to light, can you come to my house and help me with my energy? problem?
Yeah, watch. So watch. Fingers crossed. Let's see.
Oh, that might be.
But as soon as I stop cranking, it goes out. Why did it go out as soon as I stop? Oh, because this produces the voltage, like disconnecting the battery. So let's think for a minute. This bulb, 6 volts at about quarter amp, if it's on full bright. So I think of it as like a 1 watt light bulb. It's not much, not to light every house. 1 light bulb. So when I charged the capacitor and threw the switch in this direction, it did light up, but what, for half a second, 1 second? So it threw its energy stored in the capacitor into the bulb, lit the bulb. The bulb was bright, then went faint, and then went out. How much energy was in the capacitor when it was charged? I could tell from the bulb, because the bulb is about a 1 watt bulb to keep it bright, and it lasted about 1 second. So physicists use the term joules. A joule is watts times seconds.
Okay.
So 1 watt for 1 second is about 1 joule. Well, so what's a joule?
Yeah, Pico.
So think about a joule as this. Take an apple sitting on the table. An apple's about 100 grams, a typical big juicy apple. You haven't eaten it yet. Take an apple. 1/10 of a kilogram, 100 grams. Raise it over your head, 1 meter. You've done a certain amount of work by lifting that apple off the table up here. How much work? Well, work is the weight of the thing. The weight is mg, the mass times the g in physics terms is 10. So it's about 1, about 1 Newton, yeah. So the Newton is the unit of weight. When you do this, you move to 1 meter and work as the force times the distance, so 1 times only 1. So if I take an apple and lift it over my head, I've done about 1 joule of work, mechanical, I mean, I lift it. And if I do that in 1 second, then how much power did I need to do that? 1 joule per second, 1 joule per 1 second. That's a lot. So I can tell roughly by discharging this capacitor into a bulb where I know its power, I can get approximately how much energy was stored in the capacitor. And that was one of the next big physics labs. I had a bunch of different capacitors. They would charge them up, usually no more than 6 or 10 volts. Because if I charge them up to 100 volts, these ninth graders would have electrocuted them. So that's the end of my talk. Run a little over. Any questions?
And they come back to part 2.
I live about an hour's drive, not that long. So, yeah, this was just a drive up 202. So part 2, I had given to some other clubs. That gets into what's reactance and what prohibits charges from getting through capacitors at a certain rate. What's reactance? How do coils behave? And then finally, how do you measure reactance? Something has to happen with a meter, something to measure. So antenna tuners themselves look really simple. You see only 3 or 4 parts and a meter and a knob. Sometimes they don't even see a knob. They're really complicated theoretically as to how you match some unknown impedance of an antenna to some coax to some radio. So there's something called a conjugate match, and you set the tuner for the conjugate match, which essentially undoes the reactance and moves the resistance to 50 ohms, which most cables like to see. I could show that in about 40 minutes. That's enough.
All right, thanks, Barry. That was a great presentation.
Yeah.
Does anyone have any other questions?
Yeah, why is your shirt green here and blue there?
Is it? Oh, yes. Yeah. Doppler effect, maybe.
We'll blame that on the capacitor. It's blue.
All right, well, thanks everyone for attending. I think we'll shut down the Zoom meeting. We'll say goodbye to everyone on YouTube, anyone watching live, and anyone watching in the future.